Every branch of the Cahill family is truly unique. The Lucians are strategic liars, the Ekaterina are genius inventors, the Janice are creative artists, and the Tomas are exceptional athletes. The only thing that runs in every branch of the Cahill family is trauma. So far, we have learned a lot, gathered many clues, and survived many murder attempts. We've discovered who set the fire that killed Amy and Dan's parents. We've even learned their parents may have actually been madrigals all along. The journey picks up with our heroes having narrowly survived another fire in their young lives. They were successful in finding a clue, water, but they are stuck without a lead on where to go next. Can they trust anyone to help them? Can they even trust their au pair Nellie? We pick up with Dan and Amy and Alistair on an island in the Java Sea, having survived a fire that was all too reminiscent of the one that consumed their parents' lives. Ash falls from the nearby volcanic activity as Nellie pulls up on a boat. Her yelling pulls Amy out of thoughts of Isabel being the one who murdered her parents. She yells, warning them about the police investigating the fire. She and Arif, the driver of the boat, ditch it, jumping onto the island. Together, and after telling Dan and Amy how worried Nellie was, they don't tell her they're suspicious of her. They try to find another means of escape. On the way through the woods, Amy races after Dan when he yells, causing her to stumble down a hill and land in a pile of mud. And Dan finds the boat first. On board and on the sea back to Jakarta, they find Irina's bag. Inside are a few of her things like her lipstick, poisons, a leather notebook, a wallet full of IDs for every character we've met so far. They also find something resembling microscope slides. In the notebook, they find a note Irina left. They also come clean to going through Nellie's stuff, and she tells them how Clash Girl was a friend in IT, and her dad wanted her to wait to become a commercial pilot. These put the Cahills at ease for now.
Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
They tell her about the hint they found, and Nellie says it's lyrics to a song about Peoria. Alistair mentions the lyrics ring a bell to him, but before he can say more, the police have caught up to them. They abandon ship and swim to shore.
Everybody calm down. Now I'll tell you what we're not gonna do. We're not gonna panic.
Once on shore, Alistair is arrested by Indonesian authorities. On the way back to their hotel, Amy decides to stop at a public library. She can't read the sign, she just knows a library when she sees one. Same, girl.
I must do research.
We pick back up with gay Uncle Alistair in the back of a police car, surprised by who had led to his arrest, his own uncle, Bai O. He feigns some kind of medical episode, refusing to play into Bai's games. Back with Amy in the library, she stumbles upon a promising clue in some song lyrics. And then back with Alistair again. He tricks everyone into thinking he's dead long enough to knock out the police and incapacitate his uncle with pepper spray. Bio accidentally breaks his leg in the chaos, and Alistair handcuffs him to the police car. At the Peoria International Airport in Illinois, we follow the Cabras. Ian makes what I can only assume to be a 9/11 reference when discussing how it's much harder to infiltrate airport personnel with his sister Natalie. Their mother is mad that the Cahills didn't make their flight, so they couldn't intercept them. Also, Arif, the Cahill's driver in Indonesia, was a spy, banking on the siblings' presumptions that he wouldn't be able to speak English.
Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise.
Reagan Holt hacks Natalie's phone and taunts the Cabras. When Natalie chimes in to suggest force-feeding the Cahills the poison her mother brought, the poison that was in the vial found in Paris, that poison.
You know.
Oh, right. The poison for Cusco. The poison chosen specially to kill Cusco. Cusco's poison.
Isabel makes a snide comment about her daughter's intelligence. She cannot pass up a moment to insult anyone, including her own children.
Happy birthday.
Bitch. Stay out my mother house, bitch.
A stranger makes a call to a mysterious professor. He mentions how things are heating up in the hunt, and that even though he is a retired Tomas, the professor is needed. The stranger mentions the Cahills arriving, and he looks at a photo of a Zulu warrior. Back with Dan and Amy, they arrive in South Africa, specifically at O.R. Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg. Amy recounts how the clue wasn't Peoria, even though they set up decoy tickets to there. It was Pretoria. Marching to Pretoria is a traditional song sung all around the globe, apparently. Oh, also, Dan cannot find any red snapper for Saladin. While waiting for Saladin's carrier to appear on the baggage carousel, a South African man gives them a postcard for his limo service, and on it is an image and a description of Shaka Zulu. On the back is the limo service's information and a clue. Shaka was a fierce warrior and founder of the Zulu nation, and they notice on his shield is a Tomas crest. Dan buys a book on Shaka Zulu. Shocking, I know.
Who is this guy?
Nellie also buys them new cell phones and rents a car for them to drive. Dan mentions how they drive on the wrong side of the road, but they drive on the left side in Japan and Australia, where they have already been, so the math ain't mathing.
Well, I am confusion.
Anyway, Amy pokes around the suspicious Hummer next to them. She takes the keys from the Halts, and Nellie drives them away as quickly as possible, doing some impressive evasive driving.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. Now, come on now.
She does not lose them for long. Dan and Amy convince some soccer players to pick a fight with the Halts. Hamilton sends a Morse code message to them as they hide in trees off the road. Go now, beware. When they do, they notice their rental car was being driven by Alistair O, who seems to appear everywhere that the Cahill siblings go. Everyone is surprised to see him, and even though there's little time for explanations, Amy demands them from Alistair. He tells them how he was able to find and follow them to Johannesburg. Then he followed the Halts. Amy confronts Alistair about his being there the night of the fire that killed their parents, that he'd stole a poem and should have said something. He tells her how he wasn't the only one there. Eisenhower and Mary Todd were there as well. Basically any adult in the clue hunt so far. They leave Alistair, knowing he's in league with the Halts. When they're gone, he finds a cell phone with the text message SBS M347. In the car, Dan attempts to crack the postcard code with the simple substitution cipher, but it's no help. Then, Amy suggests moving consonants and vowels. They end up with the clue Constitution Hill number 4 and Church Hill. Nellie realizes she lost her phone, so she borrows Amy's to make her call. Dan gets an email from Eisenhower Holt. They have Alistair O hostage. Amy wants to leave him, but Dan convinces her otherwise. When they get to the meetup spot, Alistair is hooked up to a pickup with an explosive. When Amy and Dan go to meet with the Halts, Eisenhower starts talking. He goes on about how they must be there for the Tomas clue, and how the Halts found them by mistake because they mixed up Peoria and Pretoria.
You sly dog! You got me monologuing! I can't believe it.
When Dan tries to mislead the Halts, he dives into the rental car, which begins sliding down towards the pickup. Hamilton runs and is able to reset the bomb to a countdown, slip Dan and Amy a piece of paper, and allow them to flee just in the nick of time. You really begin to notice how the kids don't 100% support their parents' choices, how they want to break away from the clue hunt, and what it does to the Cahills. In the car, Amy and Dan have a heart-to-heart, with Dan helping to cheer up his sister. Amy is worried that she is forgetting who she is, but Dan tells her that their parents valued life, and so should they. When she asks if he remembers them, he says his mind doesn't, but the rest of him does. As they approach Constitution Hill, Amy info dumps about the history of South Africa and apartheid. I respect that they trust young readers to talk about serious topics like race and segregation. Ironic it's a scholastic books. If you know, you know. When they arrive at Constitution Hill, they visit the library that used to be a prison to find out more about Shaka Zulu. After some research, Dan finds a pamphlet on the prison next door, also known as Number 4. Together they learn that Grace had gotten to a clue connected to Winston Churchill first, but when they try to view the document, it's not for public viewing. They speak to the librarian.
I am a librarian.
Mrs. Tembeka, after she learns they are Grace Cahill's grandchildren. Apparently, they were friends, having flown together in her plane, the Flying Lemur. They find a note on the back of a photo of the two women in their youth. Mrs. Tembeka tells them about how her and Grace saw a play the night of the photo, called A Lesson from Aloes. She explains how the aloe vera plant was a symbol of the South African people, that it survived in harsh conditions. When she asks for identification, she spots their parents' fake passports. She tells them how they belong to murderers and thieves. The Cahills are in shock. She can't mean their parents, right? Outside the library and having acquired a printed copy of Churchill's letter, it's Amy's turn to cheer up Dan when he starts feeling discouraged. In the car, they examine Churchill's letter. After some clever analyzing, they decide to check out Whitbank, now known as Emlaleni. They get a tour of the mine that Churchill used to escape from the Boers from an attractive young man named Kurt. Kurt tells them how Churchill was a double agent and left a message for a group known as L, aka the Lucians. Dan tricks Amy into distracting Kurt with a game of chess so that he can check out the cave. Nellie holds his feet as he dangles down, finding a carving in the wall. He uses a pencil and paper to get a rubbing of the message when just then, the mine begins to collapse. Dan and Nellie avoid falling in, but Dan's asthma is triggered by it. Kurt gives him something to help, and then they check the message he found. Before Kurt can ask too many questions, Dan feigns ignorance and rips up the clue. On the way out of Whitbank Mine, in the car, he writes down the message he memorized. Together, they break the code by unscrambling the letters. They learn the location of the clue is buried with Shaka. They plug in coordinates to see where it takes them. In another part of South Africa, Mrs. Tembeka makes a call to Professor Bardsley about the Cahills. He makes another call, talking about how he may need the group's help. He gathers a few things, including a hunting knife, and heads out. In a museum in Durban, Dan and Amy learn that Shaka's shield was stolen by Tomas agents a while back, and they didn't bother to clue in the halts. The Cahills also learn that Shaka was a Cahill, if not by birth, then because of something known as an Isafo. They arrive next at the coordinates, pulling up next to a Zulu street fair, and further up a hill, they see their destination, a factory owned by colonizers. At the factory, they're greeted by the threat of guard dogs and an electric fence. Amy nearly gets bitten by a mamba,
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
but is saved by a helpful employee coming outside. Dan and Amy play the "we're just children" card, and he invites the Cahills inside. Inside, the employee takes him on a tour when Amy spots a door marked radioactive. On a hunch, she pulls out Irina's wallet with the IDs for everyone in the clue hunt and places Reagan Holt's ID on the scanner when it asks for a fingerprint. She runs to get Dan and Nellie, and when they flip through the wallet some more, they realize the slides have fingerprints on them. Dan takes the one for Hamilton and uses it to open the door. There, they descend an escalator into a Tomas stronghold, the first they've been in one. They pretend to be the Halts and are escorted around the facility. The Tomas agents are seen practicing martial arts forms of various kinds, preparing for a coming war. When Amy runs out of the Shaka Zulu play due to a weak stomach, her and Dan visit an indoor enclosure about 2 acres large. Inside, they find the grave of Shaka Zulu, as well as his stolen shield. Before Dan can decide to start digging up the grave, they hear Nellie outside. We immediately cut to the man in black doing surveillance, identifying a Lucian operative. Someone tries to get the jump on him, but he whirls around on the one and only Alistair O. Back with the Cahills, Amy tries to cover for Dan as he continues hacking away at the grave packed with succulents. He hits something pulling out a locked metal box. He breaks it open, setting off alarms all over the headquarters. He yells for Amy and Nellie to run.
Shit, here we go again.
They run until they find a back exit through the gardening shed, using an elevator to ride up to it. Before they can safely escape, the elevator stops and they have to climb out. Nellie is nearly caught, but the employee from earlier helps them, demanding an explanation. They stammer out a few half-hearted apologies and explanations before Mr. Becky Sisa tells them to come with him and runs downhill away from the factory.
Come with me if you want to live.
Together they run towards a group led by Professor Bardsley. Kurt is amongst the group. Dan recognizes the professor as the man who gave them the card with the clue at the airport. Becky Sisa mentions how he and the others are mostly ex-Tomas, and how they now work against them because of the way the Tomas have exploited the local peoples. While running from more Tomas agents, Dan pulls out the map given to them while in the nearby village. He uses it to guide the group around a clearing and his knowledge of Shaka to push the Tomas into a trap to incapacitate them. With the Tomas taken care of, they finally stop to open the box. Inside is a bunch of plant roots, and tucked amongst that was a diamond necklace. They realize the clue must be diamonds, before Amy tosses the necklace amongst the Tomas, who begin fighting over it as soon as she walks away. The professor buys them tickets to Karachi, a place Amy remembers Isabel Cabral mentioning in Australia. When they go to board, they're ambushed, tied up, and blindfolded. Speak of the devil, their kidnapper is none other than Isabel Cabral, continuing to give children trauma.
You raggedy bitch.
Isabel begins monologuing about how the Lucians already knew the clue. Amy says some choice words. She gaslights the children back. Usual bickering. Isabel offers an alliance and the vial they found in Paris as an olive branch, but Amy tells her she can shove it.
And
Isabel orders her henchmen to start killing them with the propeller of a plane, starting with Dan. Before they can start, however, Dan is tackled and Amy rises and headbutts Isabel. The man who saved Dan was the professor and his students, helping to free Nellie, Dan, and Amy so they can make a break for it. When they flee, Bardsley pulls out Grace's old plane, the Flying Lemur. She entrusted it to him, and now he's using it to fly the children to Mozambique. In the scuffle, Dan was able to grab the vial. He drops it and spills some onto himself. It begins burning. It's a poison, says Professor Bardsley, and pulls out some aloe concentrate to help. He tells him the only way to get an antidote is to go to Grace's home in Africa, in Madagascar. When they arrive, Dan is fading fast, going into toxic shock before they are able to administer the cure. It narrowly works, saving Dan, who awakens and asks for the clue from Mrs. Tembika. When they examine it further, they learn the clue was not diamonds, but aloe vera, also known as umlaba. They don't celebrate long as they also found a letter from Grace to Deng Xiaoping, former head of China, regarding Arthur and Hope being M or madrigals. They also find a photo of their parents smiling with the familiar man in black beside them. And that's where we end our story for now. The clue they found was aloe vera, and we've also officially seen at least one stronghold of every branch, or have we? Dan and Amy learned a lot about South Africa and its apartheid system, and I just want to take a moment to touch on how a book like this nowadays will be considered controversial for the topics covered. Bravo for authors doing the bare minimum in the early 2000s. But let's catch Amy and Dan as they learn more about the world, its history, and their family's connection to it in the next book. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to my channel for more nostalgic reading content. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!
Bye!